Now, our speaker today, Sergi, is the Education and Program Manager at the Andrew Lowe House Museum. She is a native Savannian. I don't know if I said that right. And she's worked for many years in Savannah's hospitality industry, writing and organizing corporate tours and events. Chris is the author and photographer for Savannah Scavenger Hunt that was published by Pelican Publishing and Arcadia Press. And she's always had a passion for history, architecture, decorative arts. She studied history and art at Armstrong State University in photography in Savannah and at Oklahoma School of Photography. Chris has worked as a historical interpreter at the Telfair Museums, as a docent at the Davenport House Museum, and with the Education Committee at the Andrew Lowe House Museum before she accepted her current position. So we would like to welcome Chris and turn it over to you. And thank you for being with us.
Oh, we're very happy to, it's very nice to have you this morning and share our museum with you this morning. I think we're going to go to the video, and then it kind of gives you a look into the history of the people that lived and worked in the house. We are...
Hi, I'm Rebecca Evans, Director of the Andrew Lowe House. Welcome to our museum. Our beautiful home was built in 1848-1849 by John Norris. I'm going to introduce you to my colleague, Sergi, who is going to give a little tour of the museum.
Hello. We're very happy to have you this morning. If you see the outside of the house, we're very proud of our historic garden, one of the 3 in the historic district of Savannah. And we're very excited for you to see the inside of the house and hear a little bit of the history. We're going to show a video, a drone tour of the house, and it tells a little of the history of the people who lived and worked in the home.
I didn't know they were going to let us talk.
One of the gems of Savannah's National Historic Landmark District, the Andrew Lowe House Museum, gives life to local, national, and international history. Designed and built by New York architect John S. Norris in 1848, the home is a grand 3-story residence, including a historic garden, raised basement, and surrounding dry moat. The house presents a blend of Italianate revival styles with a strong Greek architectural influence. At the age of only 17, Andrew Lowe emigrated to Savannah from Scotland to work for his uncle and namesake in his growing dry goods and cotton factoring business. In 1840, he assumed full responsibility for the company in Savannah and in Liverpool, England. In the 20th century, the house evolved from a home and workplace to the headquarters for the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America in the state of Georgia. The Society has created a museum to reflect family life in Savannah in the mid-19th century, incorporating an extensive collection of paintings, furniture, silver, and glass pieces that belonged to the people associated with the house. The museum provides guests with a visual reference to the past and fascinating stories about the generations of people related to this site, from the first owner, Andrew Lowe, and his family, including his 2 wives, Sarah and Mary, their children, extended relations, and especially Juliette Gordon Lowe, founder of the Girl Scouts. After the Civil War, the Lowe family spent most of their time abroad. The house was left in the solo care of Tom and Mosiana Millage, the enslaved and later free servants of the Lowe family. Tom and his wife Mosiana lived, worked, and raised their children in the home. Famous visitors and guests include longtime friend of the Lowe family, Robert E. Lee, and English writer William Makepeace Thackeray. He stated in a letter in 1856, I write from the most comfortable quarters I have ever had in the United States, in the house of my friend Andrew Lowe. Now listed on the National Register of Historic Places and part of the Landmark District, the house is a beautiful and lively museum that welcomes over 100,000 visitors each year. Visit the Andrew Lowe House Museum to learn how people lived and worked in the mid-19th century in Savannah, Georgia.
And I hope that gives you a little look into our museum, and now would be a perfect time to come visit if you're thinking about visiting. I was just talking with Tina about usually this time of year is our busiest season, and now we are at 35% of where we normally are, which is we're very thankful for. And we're doing more of self-guided tours, but docents or historical interpreters are on site to answer any questions you may have. So it's a really nice time to come. You can kind of get the museum to yourself. So, do you have a question, Tina?
My question was how the National Society of Colonial Dames in the state of Georgia acquired the property, because there are often really interesting stories about how they've saved houses and turned them into great museums. So
we're very lucky. This house, built for Andrew Lowe, his son inherits the home when he passed away July of 1886. And then
okay.
his son marries Juliet Gordon Lowe, December 1886. And when his son passed away in 1905, Juliet inherits the property. And then when she passed away in 1927, the Colonial Dames bought the home from her estate. And I always tell our visitors, we still feel as if it's in the family, because her mother, Nellie Gordon, founded the Colonial Dames here in Georgia and was the first president here in Savannah. And Juliet was a dame herself.
Okay. That's really interesting.
Really good fit.
Yes. And there's another connection with another National Society of Colonial Dames of America in Wisconsin, the Indian Agency House. What is the connection there?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
We think, just from a little bit of reading we've done, that Juliet's grandmother, Juliet
Okay.
Kinsey,
So
might have.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
They had so Juliet's family, which is interesting as well, especially imagine during the Civil War, and she was born just a week before Lincoln was voted into office. So she grew up through the Civil War. Her mother's family helped to found Chicago. And her mother, Nellie, was the first female to be baptized in a church in Chicago. And so all of their family, I mean, it's Wild West Chicago, founding Chicago. And then his family founded Savannah. So you imagine during the Civil War, her family is fighting very much for the Union and very passionate fighting for the Union. And then his family is fighting for the Confederacy. So you can imagine that was pretty hard on a relationship.
Do y'all have any sense on how that played out, just through in family dynamics and what you might know about the family?
Yes, they made it work. They did make it work. And it was almost like you just don't talk about politics. And when at one time her husband, William Gordon, was lost in battle, she had Robert E. Lee looking for him, but also had General Sherman looking for him, because she had connections on both sides. So it was it's nice to have that power, I'm sure.
Yes. And then actually, here's a I have a question here. Okay, this is the agency house from Kelly Paris. The agency house was built in 1832 by the U.S. government by John Harris Kinsey, Indian agent to the Ho-Chunk Nation, or the Winnebagos, and his wife Juliet McGill Kinsey. John and Juliet were the grandparents of Juliet Gordon Lowe.
Okay, yeah.
So that's...
And I know there's I think there's strong females throughout that side of the family. And I know there's a story of her grandmother being kidnapped by Indians and kind of them befriending the Indian tribe that actually kidnapped the grandmother.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was going to go back to the Civil War with another question when you raised how they enlisted Robert E. Lee to help find her husband. Wasn't one of the Lowes accused of being involved of running guns for the Confederacy? And did I misread that somewhere?
No, Andrew Lowe, he was arrested, or we say detained, twice for being a Southern spy, but they can never find enough evidence against him. But we know of one of the times he was arrested. He was also arrested with Charles Green, his sister, and his wife, the second wife, Mary Cooper Stiles, who at that time was actually expecting. They let her go, and they arrest the three, and they let her go. And when they let her go, it was secret documents. They were trying to build a clad iron ship, and he had dual citizenship. So for Andrew Lowe, his travel was a little bit more freer than most of the Confederate importer-exporters at the time. His dual citizenship helped him to travel through the borders from north to south. So she actually comes back to Savannah, and she has the secret documents hidden in the lining of her bonnet. And we have letters where her mother is talking about this incident. So it's kind of interesting. But that clad iron, what the secret documents were telling them here in Savannah was where to meet the clad iron ship, but it actually was already met by Union soldiers, so it never made it down to Savannah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had bits and pieces.
And Andrew Lowe, being jailed, he actually got home just a few days before that child she was expecting. That child was born, and that was their youngest daughter, Jessie Lowe. And Robert E. Lee was her godfather. Okay. Yes. So he was a very close family friend. He actually visited our museum twice. And the last time he visits is in 1870. He was visiting his father's grave in Cumberland Island, and he's very sick at this time. And he stayed a week in the house, and he passed away 6 months later back in Virginia.
Yeah. If those of you who are listening with us, if you have questions, please use the chat to type in your questions, or if you have some comments, we will address them from the chat. Does anybody have any questions on different aspects of the house, or? So when you're interpreting the house, is it a Civil War time period? Do you take is it like a snapshot of a particular time or decade, or how do you all interpret the house?
We interpret the house as if the house was built in 1848. So we're interpreting as if it's Andrew Lowe is moving into the home, 1850s. So it is more 1850s, before the Civil War. Our collection, all our furnishings, beautiful collection we have in the home, but all the collection, it is museum quality antiques, but we're very proud 32% of our collection is family. It belonged to the home of the family.
From Patricia McKay, can you tell us more about the slaves who were freed and who lived in the house?
Yes. So we have we're very lucky to have actually a photograph of our enslaved and also freed people of color. And it was a family, Tom and Mosiana Millage, and they had 3 children that were born on the property and were raised on the property. We actually have where Andrew Lowe purchased Tom from a Mr. Wiley, and Tom is 2 years older than Andrew Lowe. And in the photograph we have, you can see they're both holding books. Andrew Lowe was actually educating Tom before it was legal to educate. And after the Civil War, he continued classes for both Tom and Mosiana in Europe. And Tom helps General Sherman. When General Sherman came into the city and occupied the city, he actually helped him organize the 40 Acres and a Mule speech here in Savannah. And Tom was very much part of the community. He was in the Freemasons, and he did several speeches at the Second African Baptist Church, explaining emancipation to enslaved workers. And on his obituary, it says he was respected by both colored people and white people here in the city. And he has a very large headstone we are trying to restore right now. And also on that headstone, it says, faithful friend and servant of Andrew Lowe. And when Andrew Lowe passed away, he left Tom in the will, but it was unfortunate. They just passed away a few months apart, but a $300 annual sum. It went to Mosiana and the children. And then Mosiana is about 20 years younger than Tom. She became a cook for William and Juliet. And she would travel from Europe to America and from America to Europe with William and Juliet. And instead of Juliet having her conform to serve more Southern or Scottish dishes, she let her cook the Southern dishes she was used to, and she became very popular. And she actually really, she taught the other chefs in England at that time, and she cited in many of the cookbooks, especially Rosa Lewis. And she's actually, Mosiana Millage is credited with introducing Southern cooking to Europe. And Juliet bought Mosiana a property off-site, and on that property, she made sure Mosiana's name was on the deed. So it's quite amazing to have a free lady of color, a free female of color owning property at that time.
Okay. From Lynn Hunt, what cemetery is Tom buried in? Is his family in the same cemetery?
So it's Laurel Grove Cemetery South, and it's a segregated cemetery. And we just visited it in February. And we are trying to get in touch with the family to restore the headstone. It would be for Tom and also Mosiana.
Okay. That was going to be my next question is, do you still have any kind of contact with their descendants?
We're working with that cemetery to try to kind of figure out. I think COVID kind of got in the way of that right now, but we'd like to get back to that. We also had started on a free and enslaved servant tour of the Andrew Lowe House. We're working with a local who is a expert in African American culture here in Savannah, Pat Gunn, and we were trying to work and have a tour we offered, and we kind of got sidetracked with the whole COVID as well.
Mm-hmm. Does the property still have separate quarters, or were there separate quarters for the enslaved workers on the property?
Well, it sits up on a raised basement.
Mm-hmm.
So the basement level would have been the working level. It would have been, the kitchen was downstairs because the house was really more of a winter home. They kept the kitchen in the house, keep the heat in the house. And then there would be a children's dining room, a nursery downstairs, servants' quarters, and then storage and like laundry facility. So we do know by census records, the couple lived on the ground floor of the home. And then census records in the 1880s, they lived in the carriage house, and Tom is titled as retired.
Okay. Were the Millages the only 2 enslaved workers on the property? Do you know if there were others?
Yes, there were others. There were definitely others, but it was, they are constant. They were there from the beginning to the end. Mm-hmm. And when like wives would come in, Sarah, he has a first wife, we know she had servants enslaved workers that came with her when she married Andrew Lowe. And then also the second wife, we believe from letters, might have brought enslaved workers with her. But it really fluctuates on the census records. Sometimes it's very confusing because they use first names. The millages, we have always had just the first and last names, so we can kind of keep up with their line a little bit better. And there is another museum home, the Harper Folks. It's only a few blocks away, and we know that their son, they called Tommy, also worked there when he would just check on the Andrew Lowe house. Because the family after Civil War really kind of more moved to Europe. Andrew Lowe knew his children would have a better life in Europe and schools, better schools in Europe. So at that time, he kind of left the villages more in sole care of the property, and he would visit once a year.
Okay. Now, Andrew Lowe, he did not free them. They were freed by the Civil War, but Lowe did not free them right
No,
before or during the war, or
not that it's recorded.
Mm-hmm.
We just have enslaved workers on census records, enslaved workers before Civil War, freed servants after Civil War.
Okay. But the millages stayed on even though they had been okay. I think that was what I was trying to get to. Does anybody else have any other questions about any other aspect of the property or the people who live there? Or how the house is interpreted? Anything at all? Or any comments about the presentation? When I know now you are doing self-guided tours because of COVID, but how when you have in regular times, you take guided tours through the house with interpreters and
so we're Monday through Sunday. First tour starts at 10, last tour starts at 4. On Sundays, it's 12 to 4. And we do hour and half-hour tours. Normally, you would have a historical interpreter walking around the museum with you and from room to room and telling you the history. Now, with the way we're doing it now with COVID, not to spread COVID, we have the hand sanitizer available. We have gloves available, mask if you need them. We are doing mandatory masks throughout the house. Gloves are for the railing on the stairs. We have very low touch points. All of our doors are open, and our historical interpreters are doing a introduction in the parlors or outside if weather is nice, but right now it's so hot that we are doing more inside. And they're doing, we're handing out self-guided tour handouts, and they're walking around the museum. There is a historical interpreter there for questions and just to, see, just guide them through more or less. So people are enjoying it, actually. It's kind of interesting, but people are so grateful we're open. They're very happy to have us. There's not many museums open. Slowly, they're opening here in Savannah, but we opened June 1st, so we're the first museum, and then the Davenport for the whole month of June. So,
well, we've got a bunch of questions now. Let me. Mrs. Bridges wants to know who designed the gardens.
So. Yeah, the garden is in the original garden format, hourglass English gardens, and architect John S. Norris is a New York architect. When he designed the house, he also designed the gardens. So we're very lucky to have those gardens. In the house, it's more of a preservation home than it is a restoration home. We have all of our features, beautiful hand-molded plaster, the medallions over the ceiling, hand-carved wood around the doors, and then also our signature piece of our architect's silver-plated doorknobs and keyhole covers throughout the house.
Okay. Yeah, because from Mrs. Bridges too was she asked about describe the front doors. Is there something special about the front doors? Unusual about the front doors?
Yes, they're beautiful. They're all the wood on the outside of the house is a cypress wood. So our doors are wooden cypress doors, but they have these knots or bosses on the doors to kind of trick your eye to look like metal doors.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it's not like that. Yeah.
Yeah. We have from Mrs. Taylor. She asked to hear a little bit about some of the family pieces in the museum and how you might interpret a day in the life of the Lows.
So we have it set up as if the museum was like a afternoon or morning. The parlors are set up as if Mary Cooper Stiles is having tea, entertaining guests. And then the pocket doors, it's like in the family parlor, it's as if the children, formal tutors are back there their children are being educated. And we have the instrument, I always say like a piano lesson coming through. So we have it, Andrew Lowe would have had 5 daughters and 1 son. So we know the children will be around, and we have a beautiful nursery upstairs. We love our nursery. We have all the dolls, and it's interpreted as you will have the youth beds, and it's a great family history, and it's very documented because we have the letters and journals from a lot of the family members. Mary Cooper Stiles, his second wife, seemed to be a little bit of a historian. She actually would, she would save letters. And if the letters were kind of breaking down or falling apart, she would recopy them to have those and save them. We also have great family albums. So it's neat. It gives us a look into the family life. Andrew Lowe, he immigrated from Scotland as a 17-year-old boy. His uncle was established here in Savannah. He never married or had children, so Andrew Lowe came in as his namesake and worked under his uncle. And then he inherited his uncle's importing-exporting business, and that would be everything: indigo, rice, tobacco, sugar, and cotton. He inherits that business at 27 years old. And he marries his first wife, Sarah Cecil Hunter. She was a local Savannian, and that's who he actually built the house for. And our house, interesting enough, it used to be the site of the second jail built here in Savannah. It was kind of the outskirts of Savannah in the 1840s. It was more of an up-and-coming fashionable neighborhood. So they had knocked the jail down and built on the outskirts again. So Andrew Lowe bought the property. But before the home was completed, his first wife and his son, Andrew Lowe III, had passed away. The son passed away of croup, and the second wife passed away of complications of childbirth. So he actually moved into the home, a widow with 2 small girls from the first wife, Amy and Hattie. And then he, 5 years later, threw himself into business for 5 years. And then 5 years later, he marries his second wife, Mary Cooper Stiles. And they have 3 girls and 1 son. Yes.
Okay. All right. There was a question about who is the portrait of the lady behind you?
Yes. This is Mrs. Wilder, and she was the second president of the Colonial Dames. And I don't know how well you can see the portrait. It's a beautiful portrait. But we actually have this jacket from this portrait and her shoes from this portrait they're not displayed, but they are in our collection.
And around what date was she head of the NC?
Yeah, she is 1883.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So, all right, here is another question. Savannah is a city with lots of ghost lore. Does the Andrew Lowe house have any paranormal connections?
Well, we do because of the jail, it being the site of the second jail. And we did have, so Mary Cooper Stiles, Andrew Lowe's second wife, passes away in the home. And she passes away in 1863 during the Civil War, just complications of childbirth. And she passes away in the home. And then her mother comes, she writes a letter to her mother because she knows something is off in the pregnancy. And she says, please, if anything happens to me, come take care of my children. So her mother comes and lives in the house and takes care of the children. And when she's taking care of the children, her husband comes back. He's been fighting in the Civil War. He comes back from the Civil War, and he's had pneumonia for several months untreated. And she's trying to nurse him back to health, and he passes away also in the room upstairs. And then Tom Millage, he passes away on the property, and then Juliet Gordon-Lowe passes away in the home. So we have had people pass away in the house. So we've always had the stories of unusual voices, doors opening and shutting, and things being kind of moved around, footsteps, ladies' perfume, or pipe smoke. But I will tell you, when people ask, I kind of like smile. I've never had my own experience with anything in the home until we had our shelter in place when we were locked down, and the city was very quiet, and then the house was very quiet, and all of our clocks ran down. We wind all our grandfather clocks, so during the day you hear all the clocks going off, but it was very quiet in Savannah. The buses, the tourists, the SCAD students, the city is usually very noisy, so with everyone gone, it got silent. And you could hear a lot of interesting noises coming from within the house. So we did have our essential workers, and I was one of the essential workers, Rebecca, the director, and also Margaret, she was a bookkeeper. And we heard a lot of unusual noises coming within the house during that time. So that was very interesting for me, because that was really my first time experiencing that. And it did one afternoon, it got very loud, where me and Margaret, the bookkeeper, actually kind of chased it around, trying to figure out where it was coming from. And when it was upstairs, we heard it downstairs. And when we were downstairs, we heard it upstairs. So it's kind of interesting. And we went back and we looked on all our cameras. We have cameras throughout the house for security, and we couldn't see anything moving, or we didn't know where it was coming from. So that was actually my first experience with that just recently.
Okay. I know some houses have the, I guess the paranormal studies done when people come in at night and try to record different kinds of activity, but y'all haven't done that, I guess. So
we haven't done that yet, but we've had many people, ask they would like to do it.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, we've had many people email and call wanting to do it. We have not done it yet. Yes.
Okay.
That would be very interesting.
Yes. Well, we have another guest asking, what was the noise that you heard like? What did it sound like?
It sounded like footsteps on just like an old creaky wooden floor. And we have Georgia heart of pine floor throughout the house. So it sounded like creaks on just a flat surface, also stairs. And at one point it sounded like they were opening and shutting doors. We looked around at all the shutters. I had a week of just trying to mentally figure it out and going around all the shutters and just seeing if any of them were loose. And we actually secured the shutters upstairs. And it was just like, it was a 2-day period. And I'm such a history. I went back and tried to figure out if anybody passed away on that date. It was right around April, the 1st of April. The only thing I could find was that is actually when Robert E. Lee visited that last time in 1870. So it might have been getting ready for his visit. But that was the only historical event I could find on that day.
Okay. And then another question we had was, there are 2 low houses in Savannah, and the question was, is there a competition or healthy, friendly competition between the two houses?
Well, it's our house, Andrew Lowe, but then it's the Juliet Gordon-Lowe birthplace. Okay. So I actually refer to that as the birthplace, mainly Girl Scouts. Okay. No, when the Girl Scouts come to Savannah, and I was telling Tina earlier, we really miss our Girl Scouts. This is our Girl Scout season. We should have Girl Scouts throughout the house. If you come to Savannah and you're a Girl Scout right now and visit the Andrew Lowe house, you get very special treatment because we've not had many Girl Scouts. So every time I see a Girl Scout, it's so exciting. We usually like put her on social media, and she gets her own little private tour of the house. We're very happy to have our Girl Scouts visit. So when they come, and I always tell people too, they sell those cookies. You see the Girl Scout cookies they're selling to come to Savannah they're paying for their trip to Savannah. And when they come, of course, they want to go to Juliette Gordon Lowe's birthplace. But then their next stop is usually the Andrew Lowe house and our carriage house. So Juliette Gordon Lowe, when she founded the Girl Scouts, the charter signed March 12, 1912. She kind of moves back more into the Andrew Lowe house, is all year round home, and she's very passionate. She travels a great deal, but she's very passionate about starting and founding the Girl Scouts here in America. They use our carriage house. So very humble beginnings. They use our carriage house as the Girl Scouts' first national headquarters. And when Juliette passed away in 1927, she willed that property to the Girl Scouts. So that is their property. So when they come to visit, they visit the carriage house and the Andrew Lowe house. So that's kind of like.
And I would just add that I don't really think there's any competition between the two houses. We have a really friendly working relationship with them. We sometimes share research between the two museums. And we interpret, for the most part, a much earlier time period than what they do. So, we actually, right before the pandemic began, we were trying to get together with them to talk about some research, to share research, in particular about Tom Millage and Moisiana. So I think we have a good relationship with them.
That's really great to have. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, what is the architectural style of the house, of the Lowe house?
It's a neoclassical Italianate mansion, and it was originally built more as a winter home. Savannah's not good summer home before air conditioning. So they would come, our holidays, they'd come like right before Thanksgiving and then leave after Easter. So it would be the height of the social season here in Savannah. The Lowes also owned a large estate in Wishart, England, and a hunting lodge in Scotland. And he has an office here in Savannah, importing, exporting, office here, Andrew Lowe and Company, office in Liverpool, Isaac and Company. So neoclassical Italianate mansion.
So 1849 is the construction date.
1848, 1849. And also those doors, it's unique to the building. So you're talking about our doors with the bosses. It tricks your eye to like a metal door, but it has a feel like when you approach the house, we have these giant life-size lion statues kind of guarding the front entrance. And then that door looks like a metal door. So it looks like a castle door, you would think. And there is a dry moat. It goes around the property, and we're sitting up on that raised basement. And our front stairs are sandstone. Looking straight on, they look solid, but if you look on the side of the building, it's a very elegant bridge, and you can go right, or you can go under those front stairs. So it's a passageway. It goes all the way around the home. So it's very unique architecture.
Yes. Do you know who the architect was?
So the architect is that New York architect, John Norris.
Okay.
And I think our house is special because this is, when he builds Andrew Lowe house, it's the first residential home he's building here in Savannah. So he really wanted to show off. He wanted to show Savannahans what he could do. The house is piped for gas very early on because we didn't have a gas company to 1853. And then also we have a bathing room upstairs. On our second level, we have 5 bedrooms and a bathing room. And that would have been a very early bathing room for Savannah, 1840s.
That was going to be my next question, because that room looks really interesting from the video. What is the tub made from? Looks like mahogany or something.
It's a mahogany tub with a copper inlay. And there'd be a 500-gallon cistern on the roof. It caught rainwater, and hand pumps under the back stairs would pump it from the bathing room, the butler's pantry. There was a small hand, and then the kitchen. So that was a very advanced for the day.
And they'd be able to get it up there hot.
Well, yes, it would be. So under that
Somewhat.
tub, the way the tub is designed, there is a in our bathing room now, we have a copper container, and that would hold hot coals. And then in the tub, there's a drawer, and it's lined with copper, and you put the hot coals in, and it heats the water or keeps it warm.
Okay. Oh, wow. I'd never thought about it carefully how they would do that. So it's like a sort of like a large chafing dish or something with that you put the water in. So that's really interesting.
So
So
that time advanced, it would have been very
very
modern house for the day.
right. And I mean, as you said, Norris was trying to show what he was capable of as an architect, but I'm sure also Andrew Lowe was showing everybody, just how wealthy and important he was too, just to make a statement like that. So.
Yeah, and the house is not overdone. It's just like a very elegant, stately mansion. It's a grand home, but it's not overdone. Because John Norris,
Right.
he builds a house on the next square over for Charles Green, and Charles Green really wants to show off. And then you see a mansion. It's interesting. It's much more over the top. Yes.
Huh. So do you think Lowe and Green were in competition with each other? Because was this the same Green that with the smuggling of the letters? And I mean, there was a relationship there.
Yeah, they were business partners. So
Okay.
probably a little bit. Yeah, especially he had so many sons. He had like 6, 7 sons, Charles Green, and Andrew Lowe had the one. I think that was always kind of a little bit of a competition too.
Okay. Could you please clarify the relationship of Juliet G. Lowe to the Lowe Museum?
Yes, so Andrew Lowe and Mary Cooper Stiles. So Andrew Lowe and Mary Cooper Stiles, Andrew's second wife, would be Juliet Gordon Lowe's father and mother-in-law. Mary Cooper Stiles and Andrew Lowe have an only son, William Mackey Lowe. He grows up to marry Juliet Gordon Lowe. And Andrew Lowe has passed away in July of 1886. The couple marries December 21st, 1886. And so William has inherited the house, and the newlyweds, move into the house. That is his home. So they move into the house, is their new house, but then they also travel a great deal. And William, Andrew's son, is kind of bored in Savannah, and they more end up in England more than Savannah. They would just come back to visit Juliet's family. But after William passes away, Juliet moves back in the house her last years, and she's founding the Girl Scouts for her home.
Okay. Again, the little bit I've read, which may or may not be, that Juliet and William had kind of a rough marriage, particularly towards the end of their lives.
Yes. I feel as if she was very homesick in England for Savannah, but he was very homesick in England when he was in Savannah. So it was a little hard there. And then also she had very bad hearing disabilities. So it's kind of, I always think that was hard. And she'd already had hearing loss in one ear from childhood ear infections. But when the couple actually get married, people are throwing rice, and a grain of rice gets stuck in her other ear. And as the doctor is trying to pull the grain of rice out, he accidentally punctures her eardrum. So then she has 70% loss in the other ear. So I always think there was definitely a communication breakdown. And Juliet, she was more into just community service, and that's why she was just loved the Girl Scouts so much. And he was more entertaining and he raised racehorses and hunting parties, and it was kind of a little bit of a breakdown there too. I will say, on Andrew Lowe's deathbed, he actually asked the couple to wait a year until they were married, and they did not wait a year. They were married that next July. So I think both families kind of saw it coming, and they were also both 27 years old when they married. So they were kind of older for that day to marry, and both very headstrong and just personalities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they had no children, am I right?
No, they did not have children. And sometimes when people ask me that at the museum, if we're doing tours, especially for Girl Scouts, I'll say she didn't have children, but you can't have children if you're going to be mother to all these Girl Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Anything else from anybody? Well, we hope that you've enjoyed our conversation with Chris Sergi and Rebecca Edens at the Andrew Lowe House. And Savannah's not that long a trip from Charleston, so this might inspire you to make that trip and visit the museum. Chris, thank you so much for
Thank you. Thank
for
you
your
for
time
having
and all the interesting information. It's a beautiful house.
us.